Welcome, dear listeners. I'm Davis, and I'm glad you're here tonight. Tell me, does this season make your evenings quieter, or does it stir old memories you haven't visited in a while? Share your thoughts below, and if you enjoy these mysteries, do subscribe. A new tale awaits you every night. Tonight's mystery begins quietly, until it doesn't. Let's step inside, before the truth catches us outside. The morning was cold, quiet, still enough for thoughts to move slowly. Miss Marple stood by her gate, hands folded, eyes steady. She watched the lane with that calm attention she used when nothing looked wrong. Yet something felt off. Street Mary Mead looked ordinary. Normal footsteps, normal greetings, normal routines drifting through the village. But Miss Marple rarely trusted normal. She waited. She listened. She noticed small things first. A door closed too quickly. A curtain moved too fast. A voice stopped mid-sentence when someone passed. These things mattered, even on a harmless winter morning. Mrs. Fenwick walked up the path. Her steps were brisk. Her breath puffed in short bursts. She always carried energy like news was hiding in her pockets. "Good morning, Miss Marple," she said. Warm, bright, too cheerful, which usually meant she had something else on her mind. Miss Marple nodded. "Good morning." Her voice was soft, but not distracted. She kept watching the lane. Mrs. Fenwick followed her gaze, then smiled. "Oh, you're observing again. Always 2 steps ahead of us." Miss Marple did not answer. Instead, she pointed with a slight tilt of her head. A group of villagers walked toward the hall, hands full of boxes, decorations, ribbons, all heading to the village event. "Yes, Mrs. Fenwick said. "Everyone's excited. The holiday display will be lovely this year, bigger than before, brighter too. The Aldridge family brought something special, I hear." She paused, waited for a reaction. Miss Marple gave none. Mrs. Fenwick continued anyway. "You know how they are, always wanting the biggest spot, the loudest praise, the nicest compliments." Her tone dipped. A small crease formed between her brows. She looked uneasy. Miss Marple caught that. She always caught unease first. "Something wrong?" Miss Marple asked. Simple question. No pressure, no judgment. Mrs. Fenwick hesitated, then forced a smile. "Oh, nothing serious. Just talk. You know how people talk." That was not an answer. Miss Marple knew it. Mrs. Fenwick knew she knew it. And the moment hung between them. Villagers passed with friendly nods, carrying their boxes, carrying their secrets, carrying their expectations for the event ahead. Miss Marple watched every step. No detail escaped her. Small tensions revealed more than loud arguments. Mrs. Fenwick sighed. Well, everyone is excited. But excitement turns strange when pride gets involved. You can feel it, can't you? Miss Marple could. She didn't say it aloud. She simply let the silence answer. Another group walked by. One person moved differently, too quiet, too cautious. Hands tucked in, face turned away. Mrs. Fenwick didn't notice. She kept talking about decorations, about the twins, about the Aldridge pride, about the event. Her words filled the space. But Miss Marple stayed with the silent one, the one who didn't want to be seen, the one who shifted weight like they carried worry. Something was coming, not loud, not explosive, but sharp, clean, planned. Miss Marple watched the lane again, then the hall, then the person who walked too quietly. A pattern was forming, a small one, but patterns usually began like that. Mrs. Fenwick tugged her gloves. "Well, shall we head there later? Everyone will be gathering." "We shouldn't be late." Miss Marple nodded once. She kept her eyes on the lane. Her voice was calm. "Yes, let's go." But she didn't move yet, because she saw it. A small detail, a small act, a small shift in movement, one that didn't match anything else. Mrs. Fenwick missed it entirely. Miss Marple didn't. Miss Marple noticed one detail. No one else did. The village hall buzzed with quiet movements. People carried boxes. People nodded to each other. People smiled too quickly. Miss Marple entered slowly, taking in every corner with one sweep of her eyes. The holiday ornament display was set to begin. A harmless event. A cheerful one. Or so it looked. Mrs. Fenwick walked ahead, excited, busy, already greeting half the room. Miss Marple stayed back. She preferred to watch before stepping in. Observation first, action later. The Aldridge family stood near the far wall, a confident cluster, a practiced one. Mr. Aldridge positioned himself like the center of attention. He enjoyed it. It showed in every gesture. Chest forward, voice loud, eyes scanning for praise. Mrs. Aldridge stayed beside him, quiet but stiff, hands clasped tightly, eyes flicking to the display case every few seconds. Miss Marple caught that, a nervous rhythm, meaning something. Always something. The twins, Colin and Oliver, hovered nearby. 16. Identical faces, not identical moods. Colin carried himself with confidence. Oliver moved differently. Slower, more careful, more alert. Miss Marple focused on that difference. It mattered. Differences always did. At the center of their table sat the prized object. A century-old glass sphere, polished, bright, placed inside a velvet-lined case, locked, guarded by their pride rather than any actual skill. Miss Marple stepped closer, not too close, just enough to learn. Mr. Aldridge turned toward her. Magnificent, isn't it, Miss Marple? His tone carried triumph, as if he expected applause. Miss Marple gave a small nod. It is well cared for. A simple statement, but he missed the weight. Beneath it, he only heard what he wanted to hear. Pride had that effect. Mrs. Aldridge touched the case. A quick touch, barely a second, yet her hand trembled. Miss Marple saw it. The twins didn't, or pretended not to. Colin smirked at passerby. Oliver avoided everyone's gaze. Mr. Burrows, the craftsman, stood at the opposite end, silent, still, watching the display case with a narrow focus. He studied the hinges, the wood, the fit of the glass, not the ornament inside. The container. Miss Marple knew the difference. A person studying the object had one interest. A person studying the case had another. Mrs. Fenwick joined Miss Marple again. So many lovely pieces this year, she said. But she lowered her voice. The Aldridges want first prize. They always do. Miss Marple listened, but her eyes stayed on the sphere and on Mrs. Aldridge's hands, still shaking. More villagers gathered around the Aldridge table, admiring the sphere, asking questions, praising its age, its beauty, its value. But one person stood apart, face tense, shoulders rigid, eyes locked on the sphere with something sharper than admiration, not greed, not pride, something else, fear. Miss Marple shifted slightly to get a clearer view. The person turned away quickly. Too quickly. A mistake. A small one. But enough. Events like this were supposed to be simple, light, festive. They rarely stayed that way. Not when pride, secrets, and old objects shared the same room. Miss Marple could already feel the tension tightening. Quietly, slowly, purposefully. She watched the sphere one last time. Watched the hands near it. Watched the eyes avoiding it. Watched the person afraid of it. The village saw a decoration. Miss Marple saw a target. Everyone admired the sphere, except the person who feared it. The hall grew louder, not with noise, with confidence, mostly from the Aldridge family. Mr. Aldridge stood near the case again. He tapped the glass gently, a showman's gesture. "Look at it," he said to anyone nearby. "Not a scratch, not a flaw. Perfect craftsmanship. My grandfather kept it safe through everything. And now, it's the pride of the village. Pride. Thick, heavy, unnecessary." Mrs. Aldridge nodded along, but her smile stayed tight, controlled, forced. Miss Marple noticed the corners of her mouth. They trembled each time someone leaned close to the sphere. Fear hiding under the surface. Fear trying not to be seen. Colin boasted too, louder than needed. "It's worth more than anything else here. Father says collectors would pay a fortune, but we'd never sell it." He said it proudly, but he watched his father when he said it, like he was checking something, checking approval. Oliver stayed back, hands in pockets, eyes low. He didn't look proud, he looked trapped. A boy holding something inside his chest, something that didn't fit there. Miss Marple watched the family. She listened to the words, but the words didn't matter. Tone mattered, silence mattered more, and the silences were uneasy. Mr. Burrows stood near the side of the table, a little too close, a little too focused. He didn't look at the sphere the way others did. He didn't admire it. He measured it. His eyes moved along the frame, the hinges, the lock, the placement of the velvet, every detail, a craftsman looking for flaws or opportunities. Miss Marple stepped near him, not enough to interrupt him, just enough to see what he was seeing. Mr. Burrows traced a line beneath the glass with his eyes, then another along the corner. He frowned, once, quick, sharp, a frown that revealed thought, not irritation, calculation. She followed his gaze, found nothing obvious, but she trusted his reaction. He noticed something subtle. Mrs. Fenwick approached the Aldridge table again. She praised the color, praised the design, praised the age, everything that could be praised. But the family barely listened. They were busy guarding pride, guarding reputation, guarding something else entirely. Miss Marple studied Mrs. Aldridge's hands, tight grip on her shawl, knuckles pale, breath shallow. Every visitor increased her tension. Every glance toward the sphere made her jaw stiffen. That was not pride. That was dread, a quiet dread, coated in polite smiles. Then it happened. A tiny motion, a shift, a detail small enough for everyone else to miss. Miss Marple saw it, because she was already looking where no one else looked. A faint mark, near the lower edge of the case, almost invisible, almost nothing, but not part of the original design, not part of the display, not part of anything that should be there. A smear, a tiny dent, a ridge in the wood. It wasn't clear yet, but it was wrong, just wrong enough. Miss Marple leaned closer, her eyes narrowed. The others kept talking, boasting, praising, arguing lightly, but she kept her attention on the mark, a crack in the pattern, a whisper of interference, a clue waiting to grow. Whatever it was, it didn't belong. It was tiny, but it didn't belong. The hall settled, voices softened, people moved toward their seats. Everyone waited for the small speech Mr. Aldridge insisted on giving. He raised his hand, cleared his throat, smiled too much. Then the lights flickered. Once, a small tremor, a harmless blink. People laughed nervously. Someone made a joke about old wiring. Then the lights flickered again, longer, sharper, as if the building breathed wrong. Miss Marple looked up, not startled, just alert. A third flicker followed. Then darkness, complete, clean, heavy, the kind of darkness that stops sound for 1 second. Someone gasped. Someone dropped a box. Someone whispered a name. A chair scraped. Miss Marple didn't move. She knew stillness revealed more than panic. She listened instead. One shuffle to her left, another sharp breath to her right. A faint brush of fabric near the Aldridge display. A quick step. A second step. Then silence again. 3 seconds. Maybe 4. Not enough for chaos, but enough for something precise. Something deliberate. The lights snapped back on. Bright. Hard. Unforgiving. People blinked. Some laughed with relief. Others checked their pockets out of habit. Then a shriek cut the room. Mrs. Aldridge, her hand pressed to her mouth, her eyes wide, her voice shaking. The sphere. Gerald, the sphere. It's gone. Mr. Aldridge spun toward the case. His face flushed instantly. He grabbed the lock. Shook it. Pulled at it. Impossible. The case was still locked. Perfectly locked. Glass unbroken. No cracks. No marks. But the velvet inside was empty. The sphere had vanished. No fragments. No trace. Just absence. Voices exploded at once. Dozens. Then more. A rising wave of confusion. Panic folded into questions. Accusations mixed with fear. People rushed closer. Too close. Pushing. Pulling. Pointing. Colin stood rigid. Oliver stepped back. Mrs. Aldridge trembled. Mr. Aldridge barked orders. No one followed. Miss Marple stepped aside. Let the crowd pass. Let the noise grow. Observation required distance, not panic. She watched the case first. Always the case. Not the people. Not the noise. The object's absence told the truth. A faint impression remained on the velvet. A circular outline. Soft. Fresh. Not torn. Not dragged. Lifted. Cleanly. Properly. With care. No smashed glass. No forced lock. No damage anywhere. A theft without a break-in. A vanishing without force. Someone breathed. How could this happen? Miss Marple already had one answer. It wasn't magic, it wasn't chance. It wasn't chaos in the blackout. Someone had used those seconds with intent. Not confusion. Not fear. Intent. The villagers shouted new. Theories. Some blamed the wiring. Some blamed outsiders. Some blamed Mr. Burrows instantly. He stood apart, jaw tight, eyes sharp. He knew the case better than anyone. But he did not step forward. He did not defend himself. He just watched. And that silence meant something. Mr. Aldridge shook the locked case again. His voice cracked. Who would dare? Miss Marple didn't answer. She watched the space beneath the table. Watched the small smudge on the lower frame. Watched the corner, where someone had moved too quickly during the blackout. The hall boiled with confusion. Miss Marple stayed still, because stillness saw everything. The theft was impossible. That was the trap. Impossible things were rarely impossible, just planned, quietly, patiently. And this one was planned well. The impossible had just happened, and someone planned it. Chaos spread quickly. Not organized chaos. Wild chaos. The kind that comes when people think they must act, even when they don't know how. The Aldridge family stood frozen. Mr. Aldridge's mouth stayed open, but no words came out. Mrs. Aldridge clutched the corner of the table like it was the only thing keeping her upright. Colin looked furious. Oliver looked terrified. Two reactions, two motives, two directions for Miss Marple to watch. Villagers rushed forward. Everyone talked at once. People searched the floor. People searched behind the tables. People searched under chairs. Searching everywhere. Except the one place where the truth actually lived. Miss Marple moved slowly. She avoided the bodies pushing in every direction. She avoided the noise. She avoided the panic. Panic erased logic. She needed logic now. She leaned toward the display case. Not touching, just looking, studying. The details told the truth. People rarely did. The velvet inside was disturbed, not violently, not desperately, but lifted, smoothed, handled by someone calm, someone steady, someone who knew exactly what they were doing. Miss Marple noted the outline of the sphere, still clear, still sharp, meaning the object had been removed cleanly, not rolled, not dragged, lifted, controlled, and the lock still perfect, still untouched, no scratches, no marks, not even a trace of pressure. Whoever did this avoided force entirely. Force left evidence. Intention didn't. Someone shouted, "Check the back door." Another yelled, "Turn off the lights again." Someone else insisted, "It must have fallen." It hadn't. Miss Marple knew that instantly. An object lifted this carefully, didn't fall. A thief this calm didn't panic. Mr. Burrows stood near the side wall, arms crossed, eyes sharp, but too still, too controlled. Villagers noticed that stillness. And stillness, at a moment like this, looked suspicious. A voice rose from the crowd. "It's him. He knows the case better than anyone here." Another voice joined. "He studied it. Earlier." A third. "He was right next to it." Accusations spread fast. People turned toward Burrows. Not because he was guilty, but because he was convenient. Blame needed a face. Burrows lifted his hands. I didn't touch it. His voice was firm. Not frightened. But firmness wasn't enough. The crowd wanted someone to blame. Constable Briggs pushed through the noise. Stand aside. Move away now. His tone was loud, commanding, trying to look in control while everyone around him was losing it. He stepped between Burrows and the crowd. What's this? What's going on? Mr. Aldridge jabbed a finger toward Burrows. He was near it. He examined the case. He knows how it opens. The constable narrowed his eyes. Is that true? Burrows swallowed. Yes. But didn't matter. The crowd had already decided. Suspicion worked faster than reason. Always. Miss Marple stepped closer. She examined Burrows's boots. Clean. No. Fresh marks. No melted snow. No dust from the case. Nothing linking him to the sphere. Not one clue. Not one sign. But the crowd didn't care about clues. They cared about fear. Fear wanted a name. Fear had chosen one. Miss Marple's voice cut softly through the noise. Everyone is looking in the wrong direction. Only a few heard her. People rarely listened to soft truths when loud lies felt easier. But she had what she needed. She had the pattern. She had the detail. She had the absence of evidence. Burrows wasn't the answer. His calm wasn't guilt. His silence wasn't hiding anything. The real trail was smaller, lighter, sharper, almost invisible. But it existed, and she already knew where to look next. Suspicion moved fast, faster than truth. The hall didn't calm. It only shifted. Noise dropped, but tension rose. People spoke in tighter voices. Movements sharpened. Eyes watched each other instead of the display. Miss Marple stood back. She, too, needed distance. Distance revealed patterns. Patterns revealed truth. She watched the Aldridge family first. They were the center. They were supposed to be calm. They weren't. Mr. Aldridge paced. Short steps, hard steps, one hand behind his back, one hand clenched. He muttered angrily under his breath. Names, blame, excuses. He kept turning toward his wife, toward the twins, toward Burrows. Too many turns, too many shifts. A man protecting reputation, not logic. Mrs. Aldridge stood frozen again, rigid, silent. Her eyes avoided the empty case now, deliberately avoided it. Not once did she look at the velvet. Not once did she acknowledge the outline. Fear, controlled fear. Fear with memory behind it. Colin argued with villagers. Loud tone, sharp gestures. A boy desperate to look strong. He blamed the blackout. He blamed the wiring. He blamed strangers. He blamed anyone except the people standing next to him. Deflection. Fast deflection. Oliver stayed away. Near the corner. Near the coats. He wasn't talking. He wasn't watching his brother. He wasn't watching the crowd. He was watching the floor. A boy looking down when the truth sat too high. Miss Marple made note of him. Boys who looked down always carried something heavy. Mr. Burrows stood stiff near the wall, still silent, still calm, calm in a storm. Villagers kept glancing at him. He didn't return the looks. He kept his eyes forward, but there was no guilt in that calm, just clarity. A man calculating how fast the crowd would crush him with suspicion. Miss Marple looked at the villagers next, who watched the case, who avoided the case, who whispered too loudly, who whispered not at all. A woman near the back kept her arms crossed. She judged everyone, except the Aldridges. She never looked at them, only at Burrows. Bias, unhelpful. A man near the door kept slipping glances at the windows, checking exits, checking angles, checking the outside. Too cautious, suspicious behavior, not guilt, fear. Two teenagers giggled nervously, trying to lighten the moment. Not important. Not useful. Miss Marple moved on, and then she found the person who mattered. Near the center of the room, half hidden by taller villagers, not arguing, not moving, not contributing, just watching, watching everything, watching everyone. eyes shifting precisely, focused, sharp, deliberate. This person didn't show panic, didn't show anger, didn't show confusion. They showed calculation. The kind that reveals planning, the kind that reveals motive, the kind that reveals memory. Miss Marple shifted slightly to see the face better, just enough to confirm her suspicion. One expression didn't match the others. One reaction didn't belong in the noise. One person watched the crowd the same way she did, but their reason was different. Not curiosity, not concern, not fear. Control, cold control, quiet control, secret control. The kind of control that appears when someone needs to measure the damage of their own actions. Miss Marple held the gaze for a second. The person noticed, looked away instantly. Too fast, too sharp. A mistake. Miss Marple had her first real thread. One face revealed more than words. Morning came without noise. Miss Marple left her cottage early. No one else was out. No footsteps. No chatter. Just the quiet after chaos. She reached the village hall. The door was unlocked. Someone had forgotten to secure it last night, or someone had returned. Either option mattered. Both were useful. She stepped inside. The hall was still. Tables untouched, chairs waiting. The empty display case resting where it had been left. Open space. Open questions. Miss Marple walked to the window first. She always checked what others ignored. The sill held a faint sheen. Not dust, not moisture from the room. Melted snow. Just enough to matter. Just enough to show. Someone had opened it. She touched the sill lightly. Cold. Fresh. Meaning it wasn't from last night's earlier chaos. Meaning someone used the window again. Someone came back. Or someone left that way after the blackout. Both paths led to answers. She moved to the latch. It was newer than the frame. Smoother. Shiny edges. Recently adjusted. The screws weren't tight. Someone had hurried. A small mistake. A helpful one. She checked the lock. Closed. Not fully. Just enough for someone careful to lift it silently. Miss Marple's eyes narrowed. This wasn't a random trick. This was preparation. Weeks of it. Maybe more. She stepped outside through the same window. One gentle motion. Slow. Precise. To match what the thief did. Her shoes landed softly on the ground, and she saw them. Footprints. Small. Light. Not deep enough for a large man. Not spaced like hurried steps. More like careful ones. Measured. Someone used to sneaking instead of running. Miss Marple followed the trail. It led a short distance, then curved behind the hall, then stopped. Abruptly. Someone brushed the ground afterward, trying to hide the trail. But the first few prints were clear, always the first few. People forgot beginnings. Miss Marple never did. She knelt, measured the width with her glove. Small. Not a child. Not an adult with heavy boots. Someone in between. Or someone with a careful step. She stood, looked back at the hall, looked at the roofline, looked at the trees, forming a picture in her mind. A pattern, a direction, a possibility forming. Footsteps approached from behind. Soft. Familiar. Miss Marple? Reverend Morton. Hands folded behind his back. Eyes tired. He looked like he hadn't slept much. "You're here early," he said. She nodded. "So are you." He sighed. "The village is restless. People talked all night. Accusations everywhere. And the Aldridge home, well, tension fills it. More than usual." Miss Marple glanced at him. "Which sort?" "The sort that breaks things," he said quietly. Voices raised. Doors slammed. Colin stormed out. Oliver locked himself in his room. "Mrs." Aldridge cried. Mr. Aldridge shouted, "All expected, but still useful." Reverend Morton hesitated. "There's something else. Someone said they saw a figure behind the hall late last night." Miss Marple's eyes returned to the window, then to the cut-off footprints, then to the broken trail. "Yes," she said softly. "I know." Reverend Morton frowned. "You do?" Miss Marple didn't answer immediately. She looked once more at the melted snow on the sill. Evidence simple, evidence clean, evidence ignored by everyone else. She finally whispered, "Snow melted, but secrets didn't." The Aldridge home stood quiet from the outside. Too quiet. Silence that didn't match a house after a public humiliation. Miss Marple reached the gate. She didn't rush. She didn't knock immediately. She listened first. Voices traveled through walls when emotions ran high. Today, the walls carried tension, sharp tension, not grief, not shock, pressure, pure pressure. Mr. Aldridge opened the door before she knocked. His face was stiff, jaw set, eyes red. He tried to look composed. He failed. "Miss Marple," he said, a forced greeting, not warmth, not gratitude. Just a thin layer of politeness stretched over panic. She stepped inside. The house smelled of stress. Doors half closed, footsteps above, voices too close to anger. Mrs. Aldridge sat in the drawing room, hands twisting a handkerchief. Her eyes jumped toward Miss Marple, then away. She tried to smile. It collapsed halfway. Miss Marple took a seat quietly. Let them speak first. People revealed the truth when they filled silence out of fear. Mr. Aldridge paced again. "There's talk," he muttered. "Ugly talk. We won't tolerate it." Miss Marple waited. 1 breath. 2. Then she asked the first simple question. "Why are people talking about your finances?" His face hardened instantly. A defensive mask. "We are fine." Too quick. Too flat. Too practiced. Mrs. Aldridge flinched at the answer. Miss Marple noticed. She looked at the wife instead. "Are you?" Mrs. Aldridge didn't speak. Her silence was louder than truth. "Mr." Aldridge finally exhaled. "Some debts," he said. "Temporary. Managed." He didn't believe his own words. Neither did anyone else in the room. Miss Marple glanced upstairs. A door shut sharply. Voices followed. Colin shouted something. Oliver answered quietly. 2 different tones, 2 different battles. "The boys seem strained," Miss Marple said. Understatement, but useful. "Mrs." Aldridge finally whispered. "They blame each other." Her voice cracked on the last word. "They think someone inside, knew more than they said last night." Mr. Aldridge snapped. "Nonsense." Too fast again. Too sharp. He was afraid of that idea. Deeply afraid. Miss Marple folded her hands. Insurance was mentioned in the hall. Both parents stiffened. Not at the word insurance. At the fact that she said it. Mr. Aldridge cleared his throat. Yes, the sphere was insured. A precaution, nothing more. He looked away. His eyes moved toward the study door. A door he did not want opened. Mrs. Aldridge added, "It was his father's idea, long ago." Her tone said something different. Not pride, resentment, or fear. Miss Marple shifted the topic gently. Inheritance? Mrs. Aldridge froze. Mr. Aldridge stopped pacing. The twins' voices upstairs fell silent. A single word had cut the house open. Miss Marple continued, "Your father left a complicated will, I believe." No one answered. But the silence answered for them. Miss Marple watched the mother's eyes. Red, tired, haunted. Not by the theft, by history. "Who is the rightful heir?" Miss Marple asked softly. Not an accusation. A question shaped like a doorway. Mrs. Aldridge shook her head, slowly, weakly. There were disputes, old ones. The boys don't know everything, and someone wasn't meant to know anything. Miss Marple leaned back. She didn't need more. The pattern was clear now. Money, inheritance, old wills, wrong heirs, wrong claims, tension heavier than pride, fear sharper than anger. The house held secrets, not new ones, old ones, rotting beneath the surface. And the thief wasn't the only person hiding something. Fear lived in that house, louder than anger. The village always talked after a scandal, not calmly, not patiently. Talk spread like sparks. Small, fast, uncontrolled. Miss Marple stepped out of the Aldridge home. She hadn't walked far when she heard hurried footsteps behind her. Mrs. Fenwick, of course. She always carried news before anyone else realized news existed. "Miss Marple," she whispered, "there's something you must hear." Miss Marple waited. She didn't encourage. She didn't rush. She knew silence opened people faster than questions. "Mrs." Fenwick looked around, checked the lane, checked the windows, checked the corners, then leaned closer. "There was a woman," she said. "A stranger. No one knew her. She wasn't from here." Miss Marple didn't react. She just listened. Strangers mattered, but timing mattered even more. And this stranger appeared on the same day the sphere disappeared. "What was she like?" Miss Marple asked. "Calm, direct, minimal." Mrs. Fenwick swallowed. She looked anxious, not frightened, just tense. Her eyes kept moving, not randomly. Searching. Miss Marple nodded once. That matched what she expected. People looking for trouble moved differently than people looking for answers. Mrs. Fenwick continued. She walked up the main road, slow steps, careful steps. She wasn't sightseeing. She wasn't admiring the decorations. Purpose. Clear purpose. Miss Marple felt the first thread tighten. "Did she speak to anyone?" Miss Marple asked. "No." Mrs. Fenwick shook her head quickly. "No one I know talked to her. She didn't stop anyone. She didn't ask directions." Miss Marple raised a brow. Strangers always asked something, unless they already knew where to go, or who to find. But, Mrs. Fenwick added, one person noticed her properly. Miss Marple looked up. "Who?" "Mr. Seth Dawley," she said. "The postman. He watches everything. He told me." She paused near the Aldridge home, just for a moment, then moved on. Miss Marple pictured it. A woman with purpose. Slow steps, focused eyes, studying the house, then leaving before anyone questioned her. "What did she look like?" Miss Marple asked. Steady tone, unemotional. Mrs. Fenwick thought for a moment. Early 30s. A heavy coat, gloves, hair, pinned tightly. She held a small bag close to her chest. Very close. Clutching something. Protective behavior. Carrying something important. Or hiding something important. Miss Marple filed the details quietly, then asked the more important question. Was she seen again? Mrs. Fenwick nodded slowly. "That's the strange part. Someone said they saw her near the village hall just before the blackout." Miss Marple paused. Just before, not after. Before. Timing that precise meant planning, not coincidence. "And her name?" Miss Marple asked. Mrs. Fenwick lowered her voice. "Not confirmed, but someone in the post office mentioned a parcel addressed to a Clara Wynne last month. No return address. No local connections. Clara Wynne. A name that sounded ordinary, but ordinary names often carried extraordinary secrets." Miss Marple looked down the lane. Someone had walked here with intention. Someone who knew the hall mattered. Someone who knew the Aldridges mattered more. She wasn't lost. Not for 1 second. Every step she took had meaning. Every glance had weight. Miss Marple felt the truth pressing closer. Very close. She wasn't lost. She was looking for something. Oliver waited outside Miss Marple's gate. Hands in pockets. Face pale. Eyes unfocused. He didn't move until she approached. Then he spoke. Not loudly. Not calmly. Just enough for truth to slip out. "I need to tell you something," he said. His voice shook. Not from fear of her, from fear of what he carried. Miss Marple nodded. "Walk with me." He followed her toward the lane. Slow steps, careful steps, like someone walking toward a confession he couldn't avoid. "It's about the sphere," he said. Miss Marple kept walking. She didn't react. Reaction made nervous people retreat. Quiet made them speak. Oliver swallowed. "I found something. In the attic. Weeks ago." Miss Marple glanced at him briefly. "What sort of something?" He looked down. "A box. Old. Hidden behind the beams. I thought it was nothing. Just old papers. Miss Marple said nothing. He continued. I opened it. There were letters. Not many, but enough. He breathed out sharply. They weren't for us. They weren't from us. They weren't even about us. Miss Marple slowed her steps. Go on. Oliver rubbed his hands together. They were written to a woman named Clara Wynne. Miss Marple stopped, not visibly startled, just interested, quiet interest, the useful kind. Oliver continued quickly. They talked about a promise, an agreement, something passed between families, something taken, something owed back. He looked at her now, directly, eyes full of guilt he didn't earn. The sphere, he whispered. It was never ours. Miss Marple let the silence stretch. Oliver filled it. My father always said it was our legacy, our history, our pride. But the letters said his father bought it, but not legally, not fairly, not honestly. Another breath, shakier. The letters said it belonged to Clara Wynne's family, not ours. Miss Marple looked at the lane ahead. Why tell me now? Because, Oliver said, voice cracking. Clara came back. I saw her. I saw her near the hall. She wasn't hiding. She looked, determined, like someone claiming what was hers. He paused again, then added the part that mattered most. I didn't take it, but I think someone knew she might, and someone didn't want the past exposed. Miss Marple folded her hands behind her back, a habit she used when thinking. Did your father know about these letters? Oliver hesitated, then nodded. I think so. I found the box in a place only he would have known, and when I tried to show him, he told me never to mention it again. That was enough. Enough to shape motive, enough to shape fear, enough to shape the path ahead. She looked at Oliver gently. You did the right thing. He shook his head. It doesn't feel like it. It will, she said softly, because truth always found light, even when families tried to bury it. Oliver wiped his eyes. I just want the fighting to stop. It will stop, Miss Marple replied, but not yet. She turned toward the Aldridge home, toward the attic, toward the weight of old lies. Secrets lived there, old ones, heavy ones, and those secrets were finally waking. The attic held a truth the family never wanted found. The Aldridge drawing room felt crowded, not with people, with pressure, thick pressure, heavy pressure, the kind that breaks families before any crime does. Mrs. Aldridge sat on the edge of the sofa. Her hands shook. Her breath trembled. She looked at the floor more than the people in front of her. Distress lived in every movement she made. Mr. Aldridge stood by the fireplace, back straight, jaw tight. Anger radiated off him in sharp bursts. He refused to sit, refused to soften, refused to show anything except rage. Colin stood near him, arms crossed, face red, ready to argue with anyone. He looked like a flame waiting for fuel. Oliver stood on the opposite side, back against the wall, hands together, eyes lowered. His fear didn't match Colin's anger. Two boys, two truths, two different burdens. Miss Marple stood in the center, calm, still, balanced. Her presence alone slowed the room. Not much, but enough. She looked at Mrs. Aldridge first. Are you afraid of something? She asked gently. A simple question, too simple. Effective. Mrs. Aldridge didn't answer. Her lips parted, closed again. She looked at her husband. That was an answer on its own. Mr. Aldridge snapped. This is not the time for nonsense. He stepped forward, too fast, too forceful. Miss Marple watched his shoulders, his posture, his eyes. Anger that sharp wasn't anger alone. It was panic hiding beneath. She turned toward Colin. What were you arguing about upstairs? He frowned. That has nothing to do with this. Oliver flinched at his brother's tone. A revealing reaction. Miss Marple shifted her attention. Oliver? Oliver swallowed. We disagreed. Colin glared at him. Don't start. Oliver stepped away from the wall. I'm not starting anything. It already started. Their mother covered her face. Tears slipped through her fingers. Mr. Aldridge turned sharply. Stop it. Both of you. Not now. Not now. Always a sign that now was exactly when the truth mattered. Miss Marple spoke softly. Oliver found something in the attic. Instant reaction. Mr. Aldridge stiffened. Colin's expression cracked. Mrs. Aldridge sobbed harder. Miss Marple continued. Something connected to the sphere. Something old. Something hidden. Mr. Aldridge shouted. Enough. Too loud. Too sudden. Too frightened. Miss Marple didn't flinch. She asked her next question with the same quiet tone. Why did you hide the letters? Silence. Thick. Uncomfortable. Broken only by Mrs. Aldridge's shaking breath. Oliver glanced at his father. He waited for truth. He didn't get it. Colin's jaw tightened. You shouldn't have said anything, he whispered to his brother. Not anger. Fear. Real fear. Miss Marple turned to him. You knew too? He hesitated. That was enough. She stepped back slightly so she could see all four faces at once. The mother's distress. The father's fury. The twins' divide. A perfect map of guilt, fear, and pressure. Miss Marple spoke softly. There are 4 stories in this room. Only one is true. Mr. Aldridge scowled. We are not criminals. No, Miss Marple agreed calmly. But someone is lying. The room froze. No one breathed. Miss Marple looked at each face. Slowly, carefully, deciding. She found the answer. Not from words. Not from reactions. From the smallest shift. The smallest flinch. The smallest detail. She knew. She knew exactly who lied. Someone in that room lied. And she knew who. Miss Marple returned to the hall quietly. No one else was inside. Just the wooden tables. Just the empty spaces. Just the silence that held clues better than people did. She walked straight to the display case. Not to the glass. Not to the lock. To the details. Always the details. The velvet lining still showed the circular impression. Soft. Centered. Untouched since last night. She stooped slightly. Examined the fibers. Smooth. Straight. Not torn. Not crushed. A thief who hurried would have left creases. Or pressure marks. Or dragged velvet. None of that was present. Miss Marple let her fingers hover above the velvet. Not touching. Just observing the angles of disturbance. Someone lifted the sphere with 2 hands. Carefully. Evenly. A practiced motion. Not an accident. She shifted to the side. Of the case. The wooden frame had a faint residue near the back corner. White. Powdery. She leaned in. Chalk. Dust. Very faint. Barely enough to see, unless someone looked for it. Someone who had chalk on their gloves or fingers. Someone who handled old documents, or old crates, or attic boxes. Miss Marple straightened slowly. Chalk linked 2 places, the hall and the attic. She stored the connection gently in her thoughts. Then something else caught her eye. A thin line along the back panel, almost invisible. A tiny gap between the frame and the board. She pressed lightly with one gloved finger. The panel shifted. Not much, just enough to show it wasn't tight. Not loose from age, loose from hands. Hands that worked quietly. Hands that knew how to open things without noise. She checked the screws next. Not stripped, not damaged. Unfastened just enough for someone to slide the panel aside. A thief who forced their way would have left scratches. Marks. Splinters. Not here. This was deliberate, methodical, smooth. Miss Marple stepped back to see the case from a wider angle. Footprints from last night had already been swept away. But the smear she noticed earlier remained. A curved mark near the lower frame, like someone braced a knee while working, or leaned in with weight on one side. She knelt slightly, studied the angle, the direction, the placement. It matched the position of the loose panel. Someone knelt there intentionally, quietly, steadily, not in chaos, not in fear. Miss Marple stood again. Her eyes moved across the hall, to the window, to the door, to the ceiling, mapping movements, reconstructing steps. Someone had approached the case before the blackout, not during. The blackout only hid the final lift. The real work happened earlier. Slowly, invisible to those who weren't looking. She walked around the case one more time, checked the hinges, checked the lock. Both perfect. Both untouched. Both proof of intention. A thief who panicked would have pulled, forced, broken something, anything. But this thief didn't panic. This thief prepared, practiced, calculated. Miss Marple closed her hands behind her back. The picture in her mind was sharper now, much sharper. The theft wasn't wild. It wasn't rushed. It wasn't reactive. It was designed, step by step, minute by minute, detail by detail. A plan carried out by someone who understood the haul, the case, the timing, the blackout, and the family. Miss Marple took one last look at the loose panel. This thief didn't panic. They planned. Miss Marple walked toward Mr. Burroughs's workshop. The morning was quiet. Too quiet around that building. Workshops usually carried noise. Today, it carried tension. She knocked once. No answer. She pushed the door open. It wasn't locked. That told her something already. The workshop smelled of wood dust and oil. Tools were lined neatly. Benches. Cleared. Nothing out of place, except the air. The air felt watched. Miss Marple stepped farther inside. Slow, soft, observing. Then she saw it. A crate. Large. Straw-lined. Sitting slightly off-center on the floor. Not new. Not old. But recently used. Straw scattered around it. Just enough to show movement. She moved closer. The inside of the crate had markings. Circular impressions. Wide padding. Something round had rested there. Something heavy enough to leave a shape. Not heavy enough to crush the straw. Miss Marple lifted a small strand with her fingers. Fresh. Clean. Placed recently. A transport crate. Not storage. She continued her search. On one of the benches lay a ribbon fragment. Thin. Dark. Cut cleanly. Not torn. A piece from packaging. Or from an object wrapped carefully. It didn't belong to the workshop. It didn't match Burroughs's materials. Different fabric. Different purpose. She placed it gently on her palm. Studied the frayed end. Someone had rushed the cut. Just slightly. Enough for her to see it. She walked toward the back door. The floor held footprints. Small ones. Almost the same size as those near the hall. Light steps. Measured steps. Not Mr. Burroughs's boots. Not Mrs. Fowler's shoes. Someone else had been here. Someone moving quietly. Someone who didn't want to be heard. Miss Marple followed the prints. They went inside. Then turned sharply. Then vanished where the floor was swept. Swept recently. Too recently. Sweeping after guests was normal. Sweeping to hide tracks was not. A door opened behind her. Mrs. Fowler stepped in. She froze when she saw Miss Marple. "Oh," she said quickly. Her voice shook slightly. "You startled me." Miss Marple smiled faintly. "I'm sorry. I hoped Mr. Burroughs was here." Mrs. Fowler folded her arms. "He's not. He's gone to the hall. He didn't sleep well. People blamed him, you know." Her tone was sharp, defensive, ready to argue. Miss Marple nodded. "Yes." Accusations spread quickly. Mrs. Fowler tightened her grip on her sleeves. "This workshop is clean. He didn't do anything wrong." Miss Marple glanced at the crate. "And this?" Mrs. Fowler hesitated. "Too long. Old deliveries," she said. Her eyes flicked away. Her fingers tapped her arm. Nervous tells everywhere. Miss Marple stepped toward the crate again. Mrs. Fowler moved slightly, blocking. Not fully. Just enough. A small protective gesture. "Straw is useful for transporting fragile things," Miss Marple said lightly. Mrs. Fowler's throat bobbed. "He fixes delicate items. He always has." "Yes," Miss Marple replied softly. "But he didn't fix anything last night." Mrs. Fowler's breath hitched, a tiny sound, enough to confirm fear. Miss Marple didn't press. She turned slowly, studying the workshop again. Straw on the floor, ribbon on the bench, footprints near the door, and nervous sister guarding a crate she didn't want, explained. Something had been here, moved, prepared, protected, not damaged, not broken, moved. Miss Marple stepped toward the exit. Mrs. Fowler watched her closely, too closely. Miss Marple paused at the door, her voice calm, measured. You cleaned the floor, she said quietly. Not for tidiness, for fear. Mrs. Fowler didn't answer. Miss Marple stepped outside. Something was moved through this shop, carefully. Miss Marple didn't leave the workshop grounds. She stepped only a few paces away. Enough for Mrs. Fowler to think she was gone. Enough to watch the workshop door reopen. Mrs. Fowler stepped outside, looked left, looked right, then lowered her shoulders in relief. A guilty sort of relief. Too quick, too obvious. Miss Marple waited, then returned calmly. Mrs. Fowler jumped. You again, she said. Not angry. Nervous. Very nervous. Miss Marple spoke gently. You recognize the name Clara. When didn't you? Mrs. Fowler froze. Her lips parted, closed, parted again. Fear moved through her face like a shadow. I didn't say anything about her, she whispered. No, Miss Marple replied softly, but your reaction did. Mrs. Fowler stepped back toward the doorway. A defensive move, half retreat, half shield. She came yesterday, she finally admitted, her voice thin, fragile. Just before the storm. She stopped me outside the shop. Miss Marple stayed silent. People told more when silence wasn't rushed. Mrs. Fowler continued. She asked for directions, not to the hall, to the Aldridge house. Her fingers twisted around her sleeve. She knew what she wanted. Miss Marple nodded once. And you gave her the directions? Mrs. Fowler swallowed. Yes. I didn't think anything of it at the time. She looked troubled. Not dangerous. Just determined. Miss Marple watched her eyes. No lies yet. Just fear. She didn't stay long, Mrs. Fowler added. She walked toward the crossroads, didn't look back. But Miss Marple already knew that wasn't the whole story. She took one slow step closer. And then, Mrs. Fowler stiffened. The truth slipped before she could stop it. She came back. There it was. The missing piece. The pivot. Mrs. Fowler tried to correct herself. I think so. I'm not sure. But Miss Marple had already seen the truth. When? She asked. Quiet. Firm. Mrs. Fowler's shoulders lowered in defeat. Just before the blackout, she whispered. I saw her near the hall. I was walking home. She was standing by the side wall. She looked ready. Not confused. Not waiting. Ready. Miss Marple considered the detail. A stranger appearing twice. First at the Aldridge home, then at the hall, right before the theft. With a name tied to the letters. A name tied to the sphere's true origin. Mrs. Fowler continued. She didn't speak to me then. She didn't go inside the hall. She just watched the windows. Watched the crowd. Watched the case. Purpose. Clear purpose. A person who already knew what was inside. Do you think she took it? Mrs. Fowler asked. Her voice carried a strange mix of fear and curiosity. As if she hoped the stranger did it. As if that would free someone else from blame. Miss Marple didn't answer. Not yet. There was more to uncover, more to test, more to verify. But the pattern sharpened. The timing. The footprints. The letters. The fear inside the Aldridge home. The chalk dust. The crate. And now the stranger's movements. Mrs. Fowler whispered again. Why would she come back? Why look at that case like that? Miss Marple finally replied. Soft. Measured. Certain. Because she didn't come for the village. A pause. A breath. A truth settling into place. She came for the sphere. Miss Marple walked back toward the village. Square. Not fast. Not slow. Just steady enough for the clues to settle. One by one. Layer by layer. Each detail locking into place. She stopped by the bench outside the hall. sat down, folded her hands, and began assembling the pattern. First thread, the attic, Oliver's confession. Old letters, hidden for years. Letters naming Clara Wynne. Letters describing a promise. Letters stating the sphere never belonged to the Aldridges, not by right, not by truth. A stolen legacy wrapped as family pride. Second thread, the family. Their silence, their fear, their anger, their broken unity. A house cracking under old guilt. A house built on a secret they hoped would stay buried. But secrets never stayed buried. Not with a sphere that drew eyes. Not with a stranger returning to claim something long denied. Third thread, Clara Wynne. Her steps were deliberate, her timing intentional, her purpose clear, not wandering, not lost, searching, focused. She asked for the Aldridge house, then reappeared at the hall. Just before the blackout. She didn't drift. She moved with direction. Miss Marple repeated the details silently. People who come back are not uncertain. They are committed. Fourth thread, the window. Footprints small, measured, not panic-stricken. Footprints that vanished because someone swept them away. But not soon enough. Not well enough. The melted snow on the sill, the loose latch, a quiet exit, or a quiet recon. Either way, someone used that way deliberately. Fifth thread, the crate in Burroughs's workshop. Straw-lined, rounded impression, prepared in advance, not improvised. The ribbon piece, the swept floor, Mrs. Fowler's fear. Someone brought something in, or someone took something out. Carefully, quietly, with intention. Miss Marple closed her eyes for a moment, then opened them again. The pattern was solid now. Not a blur, not a guess. A structure. She stood, walked around the hall, perimeter, checked each window, checked each angle, revisiting the path the thief or claimant had walked. She pictured the sequence. The case loosened earlier in the day, the blackout providing cover. The sphere lifted gently, velvet undisturbed. No panic, no rush. A calm extraction. Someone prepared for weeks, maybe years. She considered motives. Two clear paths, two possible truths. Path 1, theft. Someone wanted money, insurance, value, a profit large enough to risk everything. A thief trained, organized, focused on gain. Path 2, reclaiming. Someone taking back what once belonged to their family. Not greed, not gain. Restoration, a correction of history. A quiet return of what was taken long before. Miss Marple exhaled gently. The second path felt heavier, truer, more human, more dangerous. Not because of the object, because of what it exposed. Family lies, old agreements, hidden betrayals. A legacy stolen and displayed as pride. She looked back at the hall door, at the houses beyond it, at the village that pretended nothing ever changed. It had changed, long ago, and last night, someone tried to change it back. Miss Marple whispered the truth to herself. Soft, certain. This wasn't a crime of greed, but of history. The village hall filled quickly. People whispered. People pointed. People dragged chairs closer to the front. Everyone wanted answers. Everyone wanted someone to blame. Everyone wanted relief. Miss Marple stood near the display case, calm, still, hands folded lightly. She waited until the noise shrank, until the shifting stopped, until the tension focused. Constable Briggs stepped forward. "Miss Marple has something to say," he announced. It wasn't a command. It was a request for order. He needed her more than he admitted. Miss Marple nodded. "Thank you." She looked at the villagers, then at the Aldridge family, then at Mr. Burroughs and Mrs. Fowler, then at the empty space where the sphere, once Saturday. Her voice stayed steady. "The first clue," she said, "was the lock." Everyone leaned closer. Some frowned. Miss Marple tapped the case gently. It was untouched, not scratched, not forced, not picked. Someone removed the sphere without disturbing the lock because the lock was never the point. A small stir. A whisper. She continued. The second clue was the velvet. Smooth. Even. Unpressed. Someone lifted the sphere carefully. Slowly. With precision. That is not the work of a panicked thief. More whispers. More eyes shifting. The third clue, she said, was the chalk dust. Mr. Aldridge stiffened. Mrs. Aldridge looked down. Chalk dust appears when someone handles old boxes, Miss Marple explained, or old letters. She let that settle. The twins exchanged a look. Colin's jaw tightened. Oliver's fingers twitched. Miss Marple moved on. The fourth clue was the window. Melted snow. Small. Footprints. A latch adjusted recently, but not expertly. Constable Briggs nodded sharply. He hadn't noticed the latch. She had. And then, she said, there was the crate in Mr. Burroughs's workshop. Every head turned toward him. He held his ground. Stiff. Silent. Innocent. She knew it. He knew it. But some villagers didn't. A crate built for carrying fragile items, she said. A ribbon piece cut hurriedly. A floor swept too clean. Something moved through that shop. Something round. Mrs. Fowler swallowed hard. Her eyes flicked toward the door. Miss Marple lifted a hand gently. No, not by Mr. Burroughs. A wave of murmurs rolled through the hall. The real answer, she said, began with the letters found in the Aldridge attic. Now the room truly quieted. No movement, no breath, just waiting. Those letters proved the sphere never belonged to the Aldridges. It was taken by their father, wrongfully. It belonged to the Wynne family. And Clara Wynne came home to reclaim what was hers. A gasp broke from the crowd. Sharp, collective, uncontained. Miss Marple continued without raising her tone. She did not steal it. She retrieved it. Calmly, deliberately, using the window to avoid confrontation, and she placed it in the crate prepared for its return. She turned her gaze toward the villagers. Someone knew she might come. Someone feared the truth more than the loss of the sphere. Every eye moved to Mr. Aldridge. His face collapsed inward. Miss Marple finished the reveal. Soft, precise, final. She took what rightfully belonged to her family, and no crime lies in reclaiming your own history. The room froze. No arguments, no shouting, no accusations, just silence, heavy, complete. She told them the truth, silenced the room. The hall emptied slowly. Voices softened. Steps quieted. The storm inside the village finally eased. The Aldridge family stood together, not united, not healed, but no longer hiding. Mrs. Aldridge wiped her eyes. Mr. Aldridge stared at the floor. The twins avoided each other, yet stayed close. Truth hurt them, but truth also freed them. Villagers whispered less now. No blame, no anger, just the awkward calm that follows something long buried finally unearthed. Miss Marple remained near the window, watching, thinking. Her mind rested on Clara Wynne, a woman who carried old pain, a woman who walked into a village alone, a woman who simply reclaimed what had never been hers to lose. Miss Marple sighed softly, not sad, not tired, just thoughtful. Stories ended differently when history corrected itself. People changed, families shifted, lives steadied. Constable Briggs approached her. "Will everything settle now?" he asked. Miss Marple smiled faintly. "Eventually," she said. "Truth has a way of settling things, even when it arrives late." She stepped outside into the calmer air. Her final thought, gentle, certain. Some things return home, one way or another. Thank you for listening, dear friends. I'm glad you spent this quiet evening with us. Tell me, which moment surprised you most? And where in the world are you listening from tonight? Share your thoughts below. Your comments keep these warm stories alive. Join me tomorrow for another quiet mystery, waiting just beyond the lamplight. Until then, keep your lamps warm. Tomorrow, another kettle will boil.